Welcome to the Counterweight podcast. I am Doug Rogers, Chief Revenue Officer and Managing Partner for Waypoint Healthcare Solutions. And I'm joined weekly by my co-host, James Canary, founder and owner of the Upper Right Corner. Together, we are focused on speaking to and learning from growth leaders across the healthcare space about their journeys and lessons learned. James and I want to explore how growth leaders manage this tension not only for their teams, but also with their leaders and in many cases, board members and investors. We will discuss with our guests the career journey they have been on, key influences that help them put them into the position they are today. We will talk about successes and challenges, what they learned from these events for themselves and for their teams. Join us each week for a new episode with our guest. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn under the name The Counterweight Podcast. Subscribe, like, follow, and give us feedback as we go along. Now on to the show. Welcome to the Counterweight Podcast. I am Doug Rogers. I'm joined by my co-host, James Canary, and we are super excited to have Lisa Rosenkoetter join us on the pod this week. We're going to have an amazing discussion, really fun topics that we're going to walk through. And Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you first. Why don't you just tell us right quick who you are, where you are, what you've been doing lately, and then we'll dive right in.
Sure. Great. Thanks so much, Doug and James. I'm so happy to be with you guys. As you mentioned, I'm Lisa Rosenkoetter. I am currently Vice President of Growth at a company called Iodine Software. And we are an AI and ML tech company in the healthcare space. We are specifically focused on the mid-revenue cycle space, which is actually a pretty new sector of healthcare for me specifically, but it's really exciting. I have an incredible team of individuals that are focused on new logo acquisition for the company. And so that's what we do. Lots of fun stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Sounds like an amazing role, amazing company. I know we'll touch a little bit more on that as we go through this, but why don't we turn the clock back just a little bit? And Lisa, give us a sense, how did you get into sales to begin with? What was the inspiration or the instigation, if you will, to jump into this type of career?
Sure. So funny, in college, I would say I had my first real sales job. And people kind of laugh about this, but really I was putting my way through school. And I had two jobs at one point, but I took on this one role because I saw an advertisement that I could make up to like $11.50 an hour. And to me at the time, in the early 2000s, that felt like a lot of money. And so I applied for a position, and essentially I was a telemarketer for a water softener and treatment company. So they sold water softeners, reverse osmosis filters, things like that. So I was on the telemarketing side, so lead generation, if you will.
Yeah.
Back when we used to be allowed to telemarket. So I would set up qualified leads for individuals that would then go out and, give a presentation, perform water quality testing, things like that, and then hopefully sell a system. So I got an hourly wage, but then, it gets really exciting when somebody goes and sells something because you get a kicker for that and, all the stuff. And I was good at it. And I was promoted into management while I was in college for that organization. And that's how I started to find that sales was exciting. I really enjoyed talking to people. I enjoyed listening to people. You're on the phone with somebody and you'd be shocked at some of the things that they tell you sometimes, but really loved that. And then as I moved into a management role, I really started to get a feel for my aptitude in that space and how I enjoyed developing people and encouraging people. And then, I went into sales directly out of college at an organization you're likely familiar with, Cerner. And it's just kind of gone from there.
So you are the original BDR SDR resource. sales development resources, doing high volume outbound calls, generating leads, top of funnel, and then teeing up the sales
All the
organization.
tofu. Yep.
That's right. All the tofu.
Yep.
I not to spend too much time, but I just, that's a great story. What did you learn from that? I mean, you were constantly banging the phones, I have to imagine. Probably a lot of, hey, don't call me, or hang ups or what have you. I mean, what was that experience like? And even if the experience, you came out of that saying, hey, I want to do this. I want to deal with this type of environment constantly. Just one more moment. How did you learn, or what did you take away from that experience?
So I think that in sales, I mean, really in anything that we do, there's this element of fear. And it helps us, it helps us, but it can also hinder us. It helped me learn adversity tolerance for sure. So, getting hung up on, that's not fun, but does it really matter? Does it really affect me? Is that the worst thing that's going to happen to me today? Literally nothing happened to me. I was safe. But it taught me how to be a little more courageous, a little more outgoing. It certainly helped me with understanding what it meant to build rapport and relationships. I'd say that was a huge part of it. You call someone and you ask them 5 questions about their water to decide if they're qualified. You've still got stuff to do to get them to convince you to let some stranger come out to their house. And so, yeah, just the importance of rapport and listening and what that can do for a relationship when you're building a foundation with someone would be, that was huge.
Such a foundational piece.
That's cool. Did you have like people in your family that had done sales? Is there anybody that you had seen in your life prior to that you said, oh yeah, I could do that? Or were you kind of the trailblazer?
No one in my family is in sales. Even to this day, no one's.
Oh.
No, my father was Air Force. So, various things, lots of watching leadership. The majority of the women in my life and my family are in healthcare in some form. I had a job in high school where I got like a taste of just what I would say customer interaction and like service. So what it meant to serve people. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being a part of making someone smile. I enjoyed a part of, having a positive influence on someone's experience. But I didn't go to college thinking I was going to be in business or in sales. My senior projects, what we called them back in the day, where you go spend a week or two at somewhere where you think you'd want to work when you grow up, right? I did a week at KU Med, and I did a week at my local health system in their laboratory, and I went to school for microbiology. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that. I loved science. Thought maybe, medicine sounded interesting. But as I got, further down my curriculum, I realized I didn't want to get to a place where I was going to start naming my petri dishes, because I didn't have the type of collegial interaction that I thought I would thrive in. Maybe organic chem was really hard, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So going into my junior year of college, I changed majors and I went to business school. So
fantastic.
Wow. By the way, Doug names all of his petri dishes.
I do.
He takes very good care of them.
I hope you do not have any, Doug.
Just a heads up.
If I turn the camera, there's a whole shelf, but I won't do so. We'll retain the mystery.
Not see that, Doug.
That's right. That's right.
Lisa, what was it? So when you got through your, sales training program, you were obviously a individual contributor and then went on to leadership. Could you walk us through some of those milestones as you look back on your career and how you got to where you are today? What were some of those key milestones, and share along the way, like anybody who, built into you or that you saw model it well? Would love to hear about that.
Sure. So correct. I came into Cerner as a campus recruit. And I was put in what we called at the time the client rep, or what they called at the time the client representative program, which is basically 4 to 6 months of sitting in a room with no windows and fake plants and a bunch of young
almost like
people.
doing lab research.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were petri dishes in there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, they were the human petri
In an
dishes.
old casino, I might add. So
That's right.
fun. But yeah, so that program was incredibly influential. It gave me exposure to people very skilled in what I was going to go do, sales, client relationship management. Gave us exposure to industry expertise. I mean, all kinds of just things that really set you up for success. When I came out of the client rep program, I was initially in a role that was called client management. So I worked with a lot of local regional health systems, big, small, across really the state of Missouri and parts of Kansas on current initiatives that they had with the organization. So what was their current technology path? What were we going to do to help them stay current, potentially augment with additional solutions? I mean, I helped with customer satisfaction. I helped with, billing, all the things. My first leader in that organization, or as that part of my role at Cerner, was a gentleman named Dave Long, and he was such a wonderful person. And I came out of the client rep program, and I don't even know what I did to deserve it, but this still sticks out to me as such an example of a leader that sees potential and knows what it takes to retain and uplift individuals. So I was making less than my peers coming out of that program. I had no idea. Cerner was certainly not my most lucrative offer coming out of college, but I didn't know there was disparity there.
Wow.
And he did. And he, within, a month or two of me on the ground interacting with clients, gave me a raise. I mean, just out of cycle, saw potential in me, understood that, gosh, we need to show that Lisa is a highly valued individual and a highly valued contributor. And that was very kind of him. I mean, that just, models to me just very caring leadership mentality. So that's a neat a leadership experience I had early on in my career. From there, I actually left. I moved into a client executive role, so I was more responsible for large system sales across Cerner's entire platform of solutions. I worked with a specific health system, a very, very large client of Cerner's, selling parts of the organization. So parts of they had a lot of different health systems across their national chain, if you will. So I was tasked with going to sell into the systems that weren't part of our original relationship, or go augment the systems that were already being put in place. And then I did that for about a year. I left Cerner for a year, quickly realized that I left more than, I left my passion on the table when I left Cerner. So I left for almost exactly a year. And within, I'd say about 7 months, I started banging on people's doors and asking people to meet me for coffee and how I could get a job back at Cerner again. So I did that, and I went into new business sales, and I started having great success selling electronic medical records and the solutions that we sold to health systems in Texas at the time. So, and I loved it. I was hooked.
Yeah.
It was so fun. Yeah.
We've had the chance to talk to a number of people as we've gone through this particular podcast, and there has been a common thread, if you will, around the benefit of having the investment of training earlier in your career. And I still love the experience and how you talked about what you did during college as a telemarketer. I think there's so much to draw from that then influences how you have a successful sales career. But just take a moment and talk about, what did you learn from that training? And probably more so, what did you put in practice initially as an individual contributor that led to your success? What were the things that you did, that you pushed yourself to do, that allowed you to see the success that you achieved?
Sure. So um, I think one of the ways that we're set up for success from that program is, I mean, you really get curated training very specific to healthcare, technology, who the stakeholders are, what affects them, where their pain is. You get regulatory expertise. So, I mean, you think about things like healthcare, technology, and the role that external entities play on those organizations together. And it's like the Wild West. I mean, it's changing all the time. Things are always getting bigger, better, faster, harder at the same time. So we got to learn in great detail about all of these areas, if you will. And I'd say, what I took away from the training is, and there were various tracks outside of that training. You could be a solution specific expert, or you could be the big picture person, which is where I eventually went. I learned quickly I can't be a subject matter expert in everything. And I learned very quickly to target stakeholders or personas, if you will, based on how what I'm doing affects them, what drives them specific value, and then really leaning back on what I learned in college, which is rapport matters. So if I'm building rapport with an individual, they trust me more as an individual, thereby they trust my organization more. And it led to a lot of broad and deep relationships at different levels and at the right levels, and getting decisions made.
Yeah, no, I think that those are great guideposts, if you will, for individuals who are going through their journey, who are thinking about, how do I continue to push myself to be the best salesperson that I could be. Your comment about rapport, if you wouldn't mind, let's just tease that apart a little bit. And I'm going to preface this by saying, right, there's a stereotype, I think, for sales in general, of you have to be charismatic. You have to, be the person who's always happy to glide hand, and you're a friend to everyone, and you're flitting about, etc. I don't think that's the case. I think I know I'm not. I'm a self-avowed introvert. I would prefer to be with less people than more people. What were some of the things that you did to build rapport that really helped deepen, if you will, that connection, and set yourself up for those successful conversations that you ultimately had with prospects or clients?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So I think to be successful in sales, I mean, charisma can be important. We don't want to sit and listen to somebody that has to give us a presentation that sounds like, they're not excited about what they're doing. But at the same time, passion can be delivered absent of charisma, right? So I think it's figuring out how you deliver your passion for the vision that you're trying to project. Secondarily, it's all about connection. I mean, we are just humans working with other humans at the end of the day. Sales is such a emotional human connection. I feel like emotional intelligence is incredibly important in sales. If you have an innate ability to understand and feel what somebody is thinking or going through, I think that is critical to success in sales. So, that comes by nature of experience as a human, your openness to vulnerability on both sides, and then, how comfortable am I being uncomfortable? Because there's times in your sales career where you get to be that charismatic person and you get to deliver all the exciting stuff. But then there's times where you have to be the jerk too, right? You have to sit down and say, no, like this is our hard line. One disadvantage, like I have a terrible poker face. Like I will never forget a time I was in this really difficult negotiation with a large group of executives, and the CIO looked me directly in the eye and he was like, you have a terrible poker face. I don't know how to contain my emotion right now, and I'm trying really hard. But yeah, so I think it's just, it's human connection. It's understanding you're a human, dealing with another human, and, knowing the guardrails of where you need to be emotionally. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's super helpful. We didn't get through your milestones of when you were doing the new business sales in Texas, and then at some point you transitioned into leadership.
Yes.
So talk about that. Like, what was that like to take your skill set as an individual contributor, and now you've got to manage a team or build a team? How much of that skill transferred? What were some of those milestones and things that transferred over, and how was it different?
Sure. So yes, after some years of success in new business, I went through a leadership development program because another one of my, highly revered leaders at Cerner saw something in me that, there was effort to take a chance on me, if you will. And, so I went through a leadership development program. At that time, I was still an individual contributor for certain opportunities, but I was also moved into I don't know, what I would call maybe a mentorship type role where I worked with other, perhaps newer or less experienced at what we do, salespeople on very large strategic opportunities. And then I was officially moved into leading a team shortly after that. So, the biggest thing is, I could show from experience on operations and strategy, but I had to, I have innate things in me, of course, that I think make me a decent leader. But I didn't know how to deal with the people part of a team necessarily. There's a lot of stuff that comes with that. And so that was learning. I was moved into a role where all of a sudden the people that were my peers were now reporting to me in some cases, or people that have been doing this a heck of a lot longer than me were reporting to me in some instances across my career. I had to get over tons of imposter syndrome. And, what that means is, why am I here? I'm not good enough. Who am I tricking? And there's a lot, I think, that comes with moving into leadership. It's not, it's just, again, I go back to that. How comfortable am I going to be being uncomfortable? Am I ready to be really uncomfortable sometimes? Because to me, that's a lot of what leadership is, right? You're taking responsibility over ideas and initiatives and people and committing to develop them and help them succeed. And that's really hard.
How did you get through that? Imposter syndrome is definitely a real thing. I think every one of us has faced it, is facing it.
Yeah.
And right? Am I good enough? Why? Can I really do this? And you've got people around you that you've got people now reporting to you that have been doing it longer, right? So you have those dynamics. How did you fight through that? How'd you get through that? Did you have people that you leaned on?
Yes. So I think that a lot of it is, again, acknowledging I'm not going to get through this unless I'm vulnerable enough and humble enough to say, I don't know, and say that a lot. And I still say all the time, you're better at this than me. You are the expert here, to my teams. I don't know what they know about things. So understanding, getting to a place where you're like, okay, I deserve to be here because I've had this success. I've had the experiences that show how I can move through this tactically. Is certainly something you can fall back on from a confidence perspective. But then I think just willingness to be a learner, willingness to be somebody that, wants to remain teachable throughout their career, knowing I don't want to be an expert on pretty much anything, and always being okay asking. So, it's really hard to have, if I think about teams and what makes them great, it's hard to have big ideas. It's hard to ask for change. It's hard to put yourself on the line. But man, when people do those things, it's like, that's where, the creators are and the dreamers, and it's like where the magic happens. So you start seeing that, and it just starts to feel right. And you get into, I don't know, you get into a different level of confidence with who you are as a leader, I think.
I feel like one of the hardest things to do in a sales role, whether it's as an individual contributor and then as you transition into a leadership role, is to retain that sense of authenticity and also to pronounce the word. Both of those are equally difficult. And I think it's obvious when it's hard because it's a moment of opening yourselves up to critique, to criticism, to doubt, and yet it seems to me that is the foundation for rapport, for connection, whether it's how am I connecting with a prospect or a client, or how am I connecting with my team and eliciting trust and confidence out of this dynamic. I'm curious, Lisa, as you made the transition, much like you just talked about, and now that you're sitting as a leader of the team, you've been on the other side, you've been an individual contributor, you've had success, you're now leading this team. What were the things that you then turned around and either looked for in your team members, and what did you expect of them? Like what were hallmarks that you either said to them, coached them, or looked from them that said, hey, you are set up to be successful now as part of my respective team?
So I think when I look at the team members, when I see skill sets or attributes in someone, typically again those revolve around things like integrity, trust. Can you obviously tactically deliver with excellence? Because we all have responsibilities and goals. Those are really the key attributes there. You can learn the stuff, but there's just things that you can't learn. And there are things you can't unlearn, which I think is also important. So yeah, I think it's really, the hallmarks of this is so silly to just a good person tends to do better as a performer. And that comes with a lot of integrity, honesty, trust. Again, I'll say vulnerability, willingness to learn, drive to grow. Some people want to do what they do forever, and that's fantastic. We need people like that. And but I love when there's just a big drive and initiative towards growth, and whether that's personally or professionally, I think it says a lot about a person, especially in sales. So where we obviously have lots of different targets we are aiming for. So
yeah. Well, speaking of that, targets and growth and overcoming challenges, and you've mentioned just a lot of themes here bubbling up about resilience and things that you've had instilled in you over the years of your experience. What are some of those challenges that you've faced as a leader in this industry, and how did you overcome them? How did you
get? So challenges are always there. I think it's some of the things that have helped me grow have been work I've done on, myself personally, that have helped me professionally. So how do I manage and tolerate persistent pressure and fear? Because it exists in spades in sales and in leadership, where you have to make big decisions and you have to be uncomfortable. That has helped me navigate through things like, it's really awful to have uncomfortable conversations. Like, I don't care how you slice it. And as a leader, it's inevitable. It will happen at one point or another. So, what am I going to bring to the table? I once heard someone say, when I was having a leadership discussion with them, clarity or being clear is kind. And that struck me so much because it's true. When you're trying to beat around the bush, or you're trying to just make sure someone's not uncomfortable or that they feel okay about a discussion, you're not doing yourself or them any favors, because then you're asking them to go execute or deliver on something that you were very unclear about. In retrospect, I can look back and say, I've appreciated the people in my life that have led me, that have been clear about my areas of opportunity, let's call them, right? So where can Lisa grow? Where can Lisa, make some changes? And those things have been super, super helpful to get through some of that. I also think that it's important to remember as a leader, I'm going to choose in my leadership style and from my experience, I'm going to choose connection over constructive criticism 10 out of 9 times. And let me clarify what I mean by that, because there's obviously a place for constructive criticism, feedback, again, coaching through opportunities. Mm-hmm. But if I'm not connected with you, if you don't trust me and I don't trust you, who am I to tell you anything? Because you're not going to believe me. You're not going to value that I understand I'm on the line with you. And I think as a leader, if you don't have some skin in the game, or it feels like, a dictation to go do something, then, we never see the types of results that we need to see from teams to have excellence unless they feel like you're in the trenches with them. So that's what I mean by, I think connection is so important between leaders and their teams.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good word. And I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown, is who coined the clear is kind.
Yes.
Clear is unkind.
I had never heard that before. And I was like, that's so brilliant.
It's incredible. It's also hard because I think there's a part of us as sales professionals, as leaders, especially if we value connection, sometimes it's hard when we have to be clear about something, and that may threaten that connection, or we feel like it might, someone might not like us for being clear. But you're totally right. Well, being clear is so much better.
That's another thing that becomes really important as a leader. That fight against people pleasing, and everyone needs to like me for me to be safe or to be okay. Yep. And there's going to be unpopular decisions made, and I think that's where you really have to get down to what's objective versus what's subjective about the decision I'm about to make. And that's when data and facts become very important.
Can we dig into that a little? So one of the reasons we started this podcast is around that tension between mission and margin. I think we're fortunate to be in an industry where there's a high sense of mission and purpose. Healthcare is very personal. And almost anything we do in this industry, we can tie it back to a personal motivation or reason. So with that high responsibility of achieving that mission, there's also a responsibility to maintain and to grow margins, right? So we're all in this because we want to help the industry and we want to help companies grow. And so there's the expectation of growth. How are you clear and kind and connecting? Lots of words there, but with the people you're working with, when there is a disconnect between, for example, growth expectations, which there's a lot of high expectations out there, or whatever it is, how have you managed that?
I think it's important to understand where roadblocks are. So often if we're not delivering on a goal or we're not meeting an expectation, fundamentally there's a breakdown somewhere. So whether, there's an individual that's not the right fit, they might be an exceptional individual. So subjectively, this person is a great person. There might be a process at the organization that's broken, where our teams aren't enabled in the appropriate ways. There might be a target market problem. So have we really identified our ideal customers and where we can win easiest and most often? There can be all sorts of issues with why we don't hit targets. And some of those can just be, are the most challenging to correct, like attitude, perseverance, drive, adversity tolerance. So I think it's important to hone in on where the issue is. And I think there's a different answer for each of those. So maybe another podcast. But it's identifying the problem and then coming to the table and not being afraid to talk about, we have a problem, where is it? And figure out what your goal is to addressing that. And then you've got some time sometimes before you see the goalpost move, right? Things don't happen immediately. But in a personnel issue, for example, you might have that great person, but they're just they're in the wrong role. There's been times in my leadership journey where I've worked with incredible people that were going to be very successful at something, but it wasn't going to be this role, right? And that's hard. Like
It
you look at
is.
somebody and you know they're great, but they're going to really find their wings if they can go be an expert instead of being broad, right? And so, I mean, I think there's different ways to address depending on where you find that problem. When it's discussions that have to go up the food chain, like we're not focused on the right target, we're struggling because we're not enabled appropriately, our teams aren't trained appropriately. There's too much reliance on, one of our key performance indicators in the market. Those can be more difficult conversations because sometimes organizations' missions are highly aligned to those things. Um, I don't know. And I think often if you've got an organization that's got a very clear and inspirational mission, margin tends to follow when you have the right teams in place and they're enabled in the appropriate ways.
You really touched on you touched on some really, really great things. But one of the components that you said there right at the end is that there at times can be either a disconnect or maybe not a complete understanding in terms of what the market will support, or are we actually focused on the right ideal client profiles or the right buyer personas, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and that can lead to a mismatch in terms of the target is here. I'm trying to move my hand in the screen. The target is here, and the market or what is achievable is actually down here. And you've got this chasm that's almost too far to cross. Um, as you think about navigating those conversations, it's one thing to have the conversation down with your team. What are some of the things, tactics or strategies that you use to help educate up? And not that I think any of us believe that you radically move the target, right? I mean, that's just not reality and how business is run. But how do you inform and help coach for how then your leadership can think about, hey, this is what's reasonable. Here's what sets us up for success from a numbers as well as a process, people, et cetera,
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah, I think there you have to lean on experience. So what have I seen work in the past? What have I seen, maybe more importantly, what have I seen not work? Um,
Mm.
and if you're looking at a chasm, as you call it, um, you typically have some options. You find a way to go up or down market, or you have to radically drive innovation. So where are we as an organization with our mission? Are we going to invest? Are we going to acquire? Are we going to continue to innovate in a new space or broaden the depth of our current innovations? Or are we going to look at how we can fit into a different market? So I mean, you saw that after the EMR became really commoditized with um, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act with high tech. Um, Everyone had an EMR at some point,
Mm-hmm.
right? It
Yeah.
might not have been a great EMR, but they had one, and they were getting by, and they were getting their stimulus checks, and companies had to quickly find ways to become more agile. And that entered, I mean, radically new business models for the way that we did business at the time with, um, shared data services. And I mean, what we call the cloud today, it's like, the very first versions of hosting software and technology and, moving down market. How do we downsize our solutions so they're consumable to a different base that we weren't accustomed to dealing with? So, I mean, I don't know. That was maybe a long-winded way to answer that, but it's, you innovate.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly believe that the growth team, so you as a growth leader, and then these teams they are very much the tip of the spear. And it is intrinsically valuable to an organization to bring that tip of the spear, if you will, closer to the people, the decisions that are being made that are then setting the path for growth. And some of that is, the experience that you talked about. What will the market bear? How much opportunity is out there? How much can we actually go pull out of the market because of the resources we have or the actions we're taking, et cetera? Some of that is, hey, here are some new things we can do that unlock growth and opportunity
Mhm,
to help close that gap or push the envelope of
mhm.
what the company can accomplish, et cetera.
I also think it's yes, thank you for that. I think that's right. I also think we miss a major opportunity as a growth team or the tip of the spear when we don't have very open communication about why we win and why we lose. So if we're not doing rigorous analysis on why we're successful and why we're not, and then delivering that message back to leadership, product, whoever needs to hear it, so we're really tying off and closing that loop, I mean, then there's going to continue to be friction, and we're not going to get innovation and development and what the market needs or what the market will bear. So I think, to your point, yes, excellent. But then also, how are we making sure that we have a rigorous process around closing that loop and giving that feedback where it's needed?
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, we're moving so fast all the time, right? Mm-hmm. On to the next thing.
Yep.
We don't take time to do a look back and say, hey, what worked?
Yeah.
What didn't work? Why did we win? Why did we lose?
Yeah.
Super, super huge point. Speaking of, what are you finding is working well? I know there's been a lot of change and innovation in lead generation, sales methodology, tactics, right? It's come a long way since the old days of strategic selling and Miller Hyman and
love
stuff
that
like
stuff,
that.
Man, that's going to be my answer.
there's still some really good stuff in there, some timeless things, but I know there's been a lot of change, and there's a lot of flavors of the month too. So if you're comfortable sharing, like, what's working well for you? What have you seen that's working well?
So I think, just in general, in the healthcare IT market, whether it's now or, let's call it, 7 years ago when I was selling EMRs to 4 years ago when I was selling big data value-based care platforms, there was a consistent theme of shifting to how is this bringing me value? So these are my business initiatives. And we're always doing some form of value selling, right? Even back when people didn't need EMRs, but it became a value-based sale versus, yes, still super important that I know who my buyer personas are, what message around value is going to work for that specific individual. But our business became so much more driven by, let me prove to you how I know we will perform. So how are we going to move quality metrics, which are, by the way, always shifting from some regulatory perspective or because a payer is pushing us in a certain direction. There's so many different environmental entities. So I think that is one of the biggest shifts, and I think it's still what works. So how are we developing a strong value or return on investment case that we can deliver? Back in the day, we didn't have to do that. Really. We had to articulate there was some kind of value, but we didn't have to get on the hook for it, if you will. Like, there are even instances where we shifted our business models to a more pay for performance business model, right? Like, you go achieve $1, I want 50 cents of credit for that, right? So, and I still think that works in some senses. In some businesses, it doesn't make any sense. I will lean back again on strategic selling. I think I will have a blue sheet imprinted in my head for the rest of my life. I find it very valuable, especially when I'm thinking through a complex, multiple stakeholder type opportunity.
So, do you use that with your team today? Is that a methodology y'all walk through?
We do a lot of what I'll call persona identification selling, if you will. So who are my key players? If something has slowed down, why? And it's typically because you're at the wrong buyer, right? And where is the pain coming from in the organization? Who's in charge of stopping that pain? So do I have an issue with physician burnout? And we've got an excellent tool that's going to assist, and therefore we're helping with retention and, pajama time with the docs. And, you get docs excited about something, the CEO starts listening, and then you're usually in a pretty good spot. But yeah, I had someone actually say to me the other day, and I found this interesting because I always think of, like, who can say yes, right? Like, when you're in sales, like, who can tell me yes? Who has budget? That is very important. But a lot of people can say yes, but then they stop you there. They don't take your initiative up to where it really goes. So it's like when I have deals that are stuck in a certain sales stage and they're not moving forward, it's probably because I'm not talking to the person that's saying no, right? When you're in a position where you're like, oh, I don't hear no that often. Well, then you're probably not talking to the right person. And then when you get a no, this is my other favorite part of a blue sheet. When you get a no, or you identify a red flag or challenge, that's so great, because when I know there's a problem, I can do something about it. If I can't do anything about it, then is it really a problem? Am I focused on the wrong thing? So I love when we uncover challenges in our opportunities, because it really can drive us down the right strategy. So
yeah, or even blind spots, right? What don't we know?
Yep.
What are those red flags, right?
Yep.
The things we don't know that we need to go find out.
Yeah. So I now carry a little crayon around with me everywhere in my pocket, and I'm like,
you've got your red flag marker.
If you're not doing it, I'll color it in for you. Yep.
That's right. So with the shift, the importance of value and return on investment for really everything in this industry, it's so highly scrutinized. Yep. Margins tend to be very thin, especially if we're selling to providers. Is the CFO, is it just ultimately the CFO that needs to be addressed? Is that the person? Is that the persona that's saying no most often?
I think it's different in every opportunity. I think the CFO is always important when money is involved, but often it's not the CFO's direct initiative to go tackle that you're trying to solve for. So, there's got to be the time where there's groundswell, right? You've got to have some form of buy-in from end users, but often also not. So if I've got a chief quality officer driving an opportunity, she knows the solution, he or she knows the solution is going to solve a critical issue for her piece of the business that rolls up through the organization. She probably wants some sort of general level of buy-in, but it's not critical to the organization's overall decision. So I think it's different. And again, I cannot stress the importance anywhere in healthcare technology that interacts with a physician, a provider. If you don't have those guys bought in or on board or slamming their fists on a table that you are the right solution, you're not going to get anywhere. In fact, I see deals stop all the time because physicians are like, wait, another app, wait, another thing outside of my EMR. Physicians are incredibly important. And then, yes, executive sponsorship of some form. It is not always the CFO. Even if they're the one signing the check, they're not necessarily always the decision maker. I now live in a world that's highly focused on revenue cycle, even though it's highly impacted by clinical judgment. So we have lots of interaction with nursing and case management and physicians within the mid-rev cycle space. Even now, I see this area of revenue cycle not rolling up through finance or the CFO. It's starting to roll up through operations and clinical.
Really?
So it's rolling up through quality.
Interesting.
It's rolling up through operations in this space specifically. So I think it changes, James. It's, 5 months ago, I probably would have had a very different answer for you. But not odd in the world that we live in that things, they are a-changing. So
they are changing. Yeah, I'm going to have some quick fire questions, more on tools and but I want to go back just right quick to what you talked about. First of all, I just full awareness. I'm going to take your phrase. If you get a yes, it may not be the right answer, or some paraphrase of that. And I'm going to write a post-it because I thought that was a pearl of wisdom. And I'm going to raise my hand. I'm in a small consulting business. I do calls with prospects. I get a yes, and I am almost willing to jump off the phone and say, "Oh, that's a win. Let's go." And I need to ask the question until I get a no. And I think that's a great lesson learned.
Yeah. No, it was an aha moment for me too. When I was having that discussion, I was like, "Thank you for that gift." So,
and I don't know, guys, all of my clients have always just said yes all the time. I've never gotten a no in my career. What are you guys talking about?
Well, that's all the charisma that you have, James.
Right.
It just,
clearly.
comes off the screen.
Yeah.
now that we're not in person for this event. How do you coach for that? I mean, because I imagine you probably have team members or have had team members where they get that yes, or they hit, I think you also really well described the scenario where you get to a stopping point and you've got to go horizontal. What are the tips and tricks you tell your team members of how to overcome that obstacle?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a good coach that is telling you yes, and what I mean by a coach is not somebody that's just going to tell you what you want to hear, but they can connect you with others within the organization. They can give you information that comes from important people that are decision makers. That's obviously, a best case scenario. So what have we done to build a coach? Do we have a coach? I think those are exceptional things to look at early on in a sales process. And also, this sounds so rudimentary, but I feel like so much can be uncovered when we understand what our clients' buying cycle is. Like, what is their approval process?
And you have to ask.
Tell you. And if you haven't asked, I bet we will uncover 7 different people we have to go address, because let me tell you about all the committees that exist these days. I mean, I don't just have to get through a capital committee anymore. I have to get through capital, InfoSec, data rights, AI committees. Those exist. I mean, all the different committees. And if we haven't identified that those exist, we have not figured out all of who we need to go address up and across. So
and
I think
sometimes
those are really
people
key
we're
areas.
selling to, they don't know. Sometimes if they're newer or they've been in one area of the organization, they may not know all of the steps and all of those committees that are required. Yeah. So we're kind of finding out with them.
Right. And I think it's critical too for, just general things like pipeline development. How are you going to have an opportunity in an end stage in a pipeline when, you don't know where the money's coming from, you don't understand the buying process, and, this is not going to close in 30 days kind of thing. It's really helpful when, we analyze where we're at in our business. So we're operating towards that. I mean, you don't know when their fiscal year starts. So how do you know when they're even going to have budget for this, right? So there's all sorts of things, but.
Well, and I think that ties back to our earlier conversation around what you've got a connection with your team member that gives you space and opportunity to have constructive conversations and ask these hard questions, because they can feel hard. I can imagine as a seller, I've been there. I feel like my deal is in the right position, and now all of a sudden I'm getting hit. What about this? What about this? What about this? And I should take that as a learning experience. I may not, because I get defensive, but the relationship, the confidence, the trust I have in you as my leader helps me take that as a learning experience. All right, some fast, just tool questions, and not asking you to spill any secret sauce, if you will, on how y'all prosecute your process. I presume y'all have a CRM that you're using?
We do.
Okay. Do your salespeople like it?
So I think our CRM is very helpful. It is a very well-known CRM, highly regarded in many industries. I think we are learning as a company, as we grow, how to help ease the burden of administrative processes that can still exist even when you have a great CRM.
Fair enough.
And sometimes that takes a lot of work on the front end, and it's painful, but there's confidence that we'll get there.
And I have to imagine, right, there's different benefits for you as the leader than there is for the individual seller. And sometimes those overlap and sometimes they don't. Do y'all use any capabilities to record and then you evaluate phone calls or conversations your team members are having?
So we do. We have a tool for that. And it's amazing, actually. When I first joined the organization, and, again, I'm never going to be an expert, but when I needed to hear how to talk about something that was very new to me, I learn best by hearing and then doing. So I need to hear it over and over again, make it my own while still hitting the key points. So I have confidence that I can go deliver that. So I find that to be very helpful. We utilize it where, if we're delivering a business case and it went really well, I can go search for, give me a great example of this, and we can walk through it and listen together. I don't currently use it to go listen to calls that have occurred that I was not a part of, unless I need to remember something or I have a specific action where more information would be helpful and I wasn't present. I do not use it. I do not use it to go evaluate performance in a conversation. I do not.
Okay. So more for informational or reference purposes and not so much evaluation. Okay.
And then AI is the craze. I mean, you're in a leading AI company in the healthcare space. Y'all are doing some really amazing things. Either yourself or your team members, are there any AI tools that you use to fast track or make your sales engagement process more expeditious? Whether it's how to craft outbound emails or interaction or prompts in terms of value proposition with a particular client, anything that you've seen be consumed from a tips and tricks perspective?
Interestingly, I'm gonna say no, we're not. We are still very human focused in the way that we lead gen. I mean, we do automatic campaigns, but we are still very human capital focused when it comes to client outreach. I mean, I have reps that figure out how to use ChatGPT to fill out account plans in our CRM, right? Like take that off my back and with that. But no, I would say broadly the answer there is no. We are not.
So I want to get into some conversation about the future, but Doug, did you get through all your rapid fire questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we do that, would you be willing to share a habit that you have, something that you do on a regular basis, daily, weekly, whatever, to help you succeed in your career as a leader, like something that is instilled in you that you just do on a regular basis that's helped you in your career? If you wouldn't mind sharing, I know our listeners appreciate that tactical, those type of
absolutely
contributions.
It's probably not dissimilar from others that consider themselves, learners and growers. I read a lot, whether it's on how to be a better leader, how to be a better manager, different things. I am a student of healthcare and of healthcare regulation, payer behavior. What are payers using that we need to arm in my specific space? What are we doing to arm our clients to better negotiate contracts with the people that, they have to do business with? So I don't tend to I don't ever think of myself as a solution expert, but I do like to be a student of the industry and all environmental factors that influence that.
So real, in the spirit of specificity, on the leadership side, is there a particular book that's been impactful for you, or someone that you follow?
Oh my gosh. Helpful? I just read this great book and now I cannot remember the name of it. I think it was called Learned Excellence.
Okay. Cool.
I can email you and you guys throw it up.
We'll pop it into the podcast here. Yep. We always love to make those suggestions to our listeners. Learned Excellence
was a great one.
Perfect. And then on the sort of the healthcare industry side, understanding payer behavior, those type of things.
So I have become
something you follow or read?
I have become a avid Becker's reader. I consume a lot from Becker's, especially in this space. I mean, generally really helpful when it talks through strategic leaders and visionaries at healthcare organizations, provider organizations, what they're thinking about to improve, what their top initiatives are for the next 5 years. Always helpful to understand how those folks are thinking. But also, I mean, heavily geared towards quality and financial aspects of healthcare. So I find that to be very helpful.
I actually hadn't thought to ask this, but I'm kind of, it's hitting me now of, we're in an industry that had traditionally been very male dominated, with, in sales roles, in technology, You've obviously been able to cut through that. What advice would you give to young women out there who are listening? Folks like my daughter, if she listens to this podcast, hopefully. What would you say to them in terms of advice for young female leaders out there?
I mean, grit. Just keep getting up. I've had so many perceived failures in my life and my career, whether personally or professionally, and I've chosen to, again, get uncomfortable and dig in and do better. And it is, have I ever experienced this isn't happening for me because I'm a woman feelings? Absolutely. Have I been able to show I deserve a seat at the table because I'm helping build the table? Yes. And that is because I keep going. And I think it's constant learning, constant growth, personally and professionally. Have open conversations. I mean, don't be afraid to ask. Like, that was super hard for me, when you first struggle with that imposter syndrome, which, like you said, James, just continues to kind of follow you around for the rest of your life. But, ask why not? And, maybe somebody doesn't understand where there's an opportunity and, you've got the big idea. But I mean, I think it's, more important than ever that, women realize they have a very valuable seat at that table.
Well said. Well said. There's been a couple of phrases that have just really stuck with me as you've gone through both your journey and what you do and how you approach this role. I love, and candidly, I'm going to steal and use ad nauseum, adversity tolerance. I think that is a wonderful mindset. I love the phrase that you use, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'm workshopping the title, but I really think the asking for yes, but you should really be asking for no. That's it. That's the one.
Yeah, we could probably clean that up a little bit.
It's a process. It's a process. James is going to have a surprise question here in a second. We do try to keep things fun and interesting.
Major surprise.
That's right. But to bring us to that point, just one final thing I would ask, Lisa. You're in a very exciting space with the company and the role that you're in. I think we've all talked about that healthcare is undergoing a lot of change, probably much more rapidly than anyone would have expected or appreciated given this industry. I'm just curious, as you look forward, what are some of the things either that you're super excited about, or you would take a moment to prognosticate and say, hey, I think this is what healthcare is going to look like in the next 5 years?
Holy cow. Unfortunately, I think it's hard. I don't necessarily think we're going to see a lot of change in healthcare per se in 5 years. I've been hopeful for that for a long time, as I think a lot of us have been. And I think, that's hampered in many ways. I certainly got very excited in my career and am still incredibly excited and passionate about, value-based care. You gentlemen have been on that journey for a long time as well. And, the consumerism of healthcare. What I do think is very interesting is how our clients are shifting, see that delivering exceptional experiences for their patients garners network loyalty. And then, what am I delivering as a solution that helps advance that experience? So, we're always going to be fighting the payers. We're always going to have regulation. Things are never going to be perfect. Margin's always going to be small. But what am I doing to help advance that mission of excellence? Quality is expected. Experience is nice to have. So how do we help bring those things together? Where healthcare is going to be in 5 years, I don't know. I am excited about the opportunity that technology has always brought to the table with healthcare. I think AI, not selfishly, I think it's pretty cool what we can do. And again, I think that's solely because I now see the harness potential of delivering exceptional experiences for a UR nurse or a physician who has to review a query to make sure documentation is appropriate So a patient is then not affected by multiple denials because we're not meeting payer needs. I mean, it's just this cycle. And I think it's really cool to have things in the market and that are constantly being innovated and developed in the market to, hit those just niche little areas that help so much.
I agree. I think it's probably the hardest thing to prognosticate this particular industry. But it's so exciting.
The crystal ball broke a really long time.
That's right. But who would not want to be part of this ride?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally, I could not imagine doing anything else with my life at this point. I could be a great salesperson and a decent leader, but I could never go sell a widget. Yeah. Sorry, water softener people that might want me back in your camp.
It's a different kind. It's a different kind of software.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it not?
But I love selling vision, and I love selling potential, So
yeah, absolutely. All right, James.
Well, thank you for being a guest.
It was my pleasure. It's so good to see you
here on the Counterweight. You've been fantastic.
You have, yes.
Now, this next question may cause you to regret your decision to join us here. It's a very tough question.
Okay.
And you have to give one answer. Here we go. You're hosting a client. They're coming to Kansas City, and they ask to go to dinner for barbecue. Kansas City barbecue. Where do you take them?
Joe's,
Kansas City. No hesitation. Doug, we need to tally this up. I think Joe's is in the lead.
I think so. We're going to get a counter. But old or new? Gas station or full-fledged?
So see, now you're getting too detailed because I'd have like qualifiers for all of the barbecue places. I mean, the old one is definitely the experience, because where else can you go get a barbecue sandwich and like also buy Pop-Tarts if you need them?
There.
That's yes.
Absolutely.
Or get an oil change.
They got everything.
Yeah.
Gasoline, they got unleaded, whatever you need.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah, well, very good. We'll have to tally up, Doug, who's winning, but I think Joe's is right up there. They're not even a sponsor of this podcast, so maybe we need
soon to be
reach out.
That's right.
Marketing this.
So
yeah.
Fantastic. It's been a privilege, a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. Lisa. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you soon. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are excited to bring new episodes out each week. We are incredibly grateful to our guests and our listeners. Let us know what you think by commenting on the episodes. We are proudly sponsored by the upper right corner, which provides advice on strategic growth, including growth assessments and strategy, go-to-network planning, sales leadership and team coaching, and fractional leadership roles. For more, visit theupperrightcorner.com. Waypoint Healthcare Solutions is also proud to sponsor the Counterweight podcast. Waypoint HCS is a focused consulting organization helping health systems, providers, and organizations to develop and implement patient engagement strategies. Waypoint HCS provides strategic consulting and patient engagement technology guidance and selection. Waypoint also helps support implementation and ongoing program management. For more, visit Waypoint HCS's LinkedIn page or waypointhcs.com. Thank you to our guests and our listeners. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe, like, and follow, and we look forward to joining you again next Wednesday for another episode of The Counterweight.